Welcome to a quick discussion of Spider-Man Miles Morales. With the holiday season and the recent PC release, I felt inspired to go through this game again and wanted to give my overall thoughts. Spider-Man Miles Morales was released in 2020 for the PS4 and PS5. Despite being a PS5 launch title and also a cross-gen game, I actually think this is a great showcase of the hardware. This is the Performance RT mode, which targets 1440p at 60 frames per second with ray tracing enabled. There are also modes for 4K 30 with ray tracing and a high frame rate mode without ray tracing. If I'm not mistaken, the high frame rate mode can actually target up to 120 FPS. As someone with a 1080p television, I really like having the option for a lower resolution mode with the higher frame rate and still keeping ray tracing. Because honestly, having ray tracing really helps the overall presentation, but I also like not having to lose out on 60 FPS. Fundamentally, this game is very similar to the 2018 Spider-Man game by Insomniac Games, which I also really enjoyed. I think I actually like this game slightly more, though, in some ways. Also, one other thing about this version, the loading times are also amazingly fast. Like, the initial load from the menu into the game is like near instantaneous, and that's basically how every load time in the game works. As someone who played the PS4 version of the 2018 game, that is definitely a welcome change. I haven't actually played the PS4 version of Miles Morales. I specifically waited until I could find a PS5 in order to play the game, so I can't exactly speak for that version's quality, but based on the 2018 game, I imagine it's like, 30 FPS without any like higher frame rate modes, and also it probably has worse load times, but beyond that, I'm sure it's perfectly like playable, but not like optimal, if that makes sense. So yeah, in general, I definitely think Miles Morales is a more interesting game in some ways. Though I do think the first game does have some pros as well. Miles Morales was positioned as a smaller title by comparison, so for example, it's not full price. Traditionally now, PlayStation 5 exclusives are $70, this was only $50. However, there was an Ultimate Edition that actually includes a PS5 version of the 2018 game that basically retroactively adds in a bunch of the graphical improvements to the 2018 game. And also changes the look of Peter Parker, because they changed like the motion capture actor between this game and Miles Morales, so they basically retroactively added the new actor in this game to the 2018 game, which was actually a very divisive change. I don't mind it too much, to be honest. In general, though, this game just has less downtime, I think, and that's part of the reason why I enjoy it more. The 2018 game is fantastic. Like, it's one of my favorite PS4 games, but the problem I have with it is there's a lot of filler, basically, which is kind of just a problem with open world games in general. That game is like, 20 hours, I'd say, for main story, maybe 30, depending on how many, side quests you want to do along with the main story. While Miles Morales, I'd say, maybe is closer to, 12 to 15 hours, on the first playthrough without, everything fully upgraded and everything. So yeah, it is considerably shorter, and I think the game actually benefits from being shorter, because it doesn't, lose momentum, which is basically the problem that the 2018 game has. A lot of times, missions would be, there were a lot of missions that just weren't as enjoyable for some reason or another, a lot of stealth missions, for example, and I feel like there's less downtime in this game. I also just like having a different character, to be honest. As a Spider-Man fan since like the initial movies in like the early 2000s, it is actually really nice having a different Spider-Man in the spotlight. And I still need to actually see Into the Spider-Verse, especially with the sequel coming out. Someday I'll get around to watching that because I've heard very good things about that as well, and because I do actually like the character of Miles in this game and in this universe. Speaking of which, one thing I really like about this is how the basic gameplay is the same between the two characters, but they have unique attributes and animations that help them to stand apart. So for example, Peter Parker's Spider-Man has a lot more gadgets than this. Miles does not have that many gadgets by comparison. Like, he has basic webbing and like a gravity pull and like remote mines and like hollow drones to distract enemies. But in general, he relies a lot more on Venom powers, not to be confused with the character Venom, that'll be Spider-Man 2. But yeah, he has these like charged attacks that can launch enemies or like deal a ton of damage, break through shields, and it definitely helps to like vary up the gameplay from the first game. I also just think Miles has a lot of charm in the way the character is animated. For example, in this universe, Peter Parker has actually been Spider-Man for a really long time, like I want to say a decade or something, while Miles gets his powers during the first game, so he hasn't been Spider-Man very long, and that shows in the way the character actually animates, and I think that's actually really cool, that his animations are a little bit less graceful deliberately to show that he has less experience being Spider-Man in comparison to Peter Parker. I have no clue where this last transmitter is actually, completely lost track, and I'm not seeing it highlighting with the spider sense. Maybe over here. But yeah, in general, I do like the character Miles, and yeah, just having a different character is actually novel, and compared to just having more stories revolving around Peter Parker, which has totally never been done before. There it is, I see it now. So yeah, I am looking forward to the sequel. It looks like, at least from what little we know, because all we really have is that initial teaser trailer. It looks like both characters will be in the game. I hope both are still playable. I assume they are, since they have the gameplay foundations of both characters already set up. So yeah, I am looking forward to seeing how the characters are further differentiated in terms of like movesets and animations, especially if they're in the same game together. I think they might have to do more to set them apart, if that makes sense. So I am curious to see what they do there. Of course, there's also a lot of speculation of will we get another playable character, since this teaser seems to be heavily hinting at Venom. Could it be like an Ultimate Spider-Man for like GameCube, PS2, Xbox, where you also have Venom as a playable character, which could be interesting, especially with this universe's iteration of Venom that isn't entirely standard, without going into too many like spoilery details. So yeah, I am definitely looking forward to that. As far as we know, it's supposed to come out sometime in 2023, assuming it doesn't get delayed. Yeah, at the time of this recording, we haven't heard anything new in terms of like, a delay or like a more concrete release date. The studio is also like working on more games than this. Like they're also working on a Wolverine game. During the development of Miles Morales, actually, like 7 months later, I think, Insomniac actually released Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, because they have multiple studios working on different games at the same time. So the turnaround by Insomniac is kind of absurd, in my opinion. Like, it is absurdly fast, though to be fair, that's kind of been a theme with them for a while, for better or worse. So to be fair, with the early Ratchet & Clank games, I don't think it was for exactly great reasons. It was mostly crunch, why the early Ratchet & Clank games were able to come out like a year apart from each other. Yeah, it does seem like these games still have pretty substantial development periods. It's just you have 2 teams, so it feels like they can actually get games out relatively quickly. But yeah, they are still in development for a while. I also feel like Spider-Man inherently would be an easier game to develop in general because you have the ability to reuse like some assets from each game. Like, I hope they expand the city a little bit more. One thing I'm hoping for is because they aren't going to be constrained by the PS4 anymore, that they have more of New York accessible and also up the swinging speed for both characters. So yeah, you have more area to explore, but you can actually explore it faster. I almost feel like for the PS4 games, you're kind of limited in terms of like loading. So obviously you can't swing too fast or else you might run into issues, with loading. So I think I remember reading specifically of something about that. So yeah, I hope they actually do make it easier to like traverse the world and also just make New York, more of New York accessible. Yeah, I really don't have a lot of like theories or hopes for the new game, partly just because it's so far out. Yeah, I hope it's 2023. I would not be surprised if it did get delayed to 24 though. I don't remember if the 2018 game actually got delayed. This game also had a really fast turnaround from like the PlayStation 5 announcement to releasing for launch, which is also pretty impressive. While they were also working on overhauling the previous game with the graphical improvements of Miles Morales. So yeah, I am very impressed a lot of times with Insomniac's ability to pump out games of this caliber this quickly. So yeah, I can't say I'm not looking forward to the new game. I almost feel like in some ways the main reason why I'm not excited is just because, well, for one thing, them making a Wolverine game is a little bit new. This will be their 3rd Spider-Man game, so it's a little bit less novel, I guess. Even though I'm very positive it's going to be a quality experience. It's just, not as novel, basically. And also, like, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was also really good, so I kind of miss when they worked, like, more on the Ratchet & Clank series, but it makes sense. These games do very well. I definitely am excited for Spider-Man 2, whenever it does release. So yeah, another thing I was thinking about is when the first game was actually announced, I remember being excited about it, not because it was a Spider-Man game, but because it was Insomniac, because Ratchet & Clank has always been one of my favorite PlayStation franchises, actually. Ever since I had a PS2, I remember really liking the Ratchet & Clank games I played, which was not all of them. I never finished the first game, actually. I've been trying to figure out a way to actually do like a video or a let's play of the Ratchet & Clank games, just because I really do like the classic games of that series. Yeah, in some ways I almost wish like we could alternate between like a Marvel game and a Ratchet & Clank, rather than right now where we're alternating between Marvel and Marvel, even though I fully believe Wolverine will also be really good. And yeah, in some ways, I am actually more interested because it almost feels a little bit outside of their traditional, style. So for example, when it was announced Insomniac would be making a Spider-Man game, it's like, okay, that makes sense. You have a very quippy character who fights with gadgets, so it made sense. And also some like, I don't know if I'd say like platforming elements in the case of this, but like, Ratchet & Clank being a platformer, I almost feel like the traversal styles of Ratchet & Clank with like the swing shot and everything would work well for Insomniac. So yeah, I had total faith that this game would be good. I think it was actually better than I expected it to be, as someone who's played the 2018 game like 4 or 5 times. To be fair, that might also be why I like Miles Morales better, just because, having played it only 3 times, I'm a little less burnt out. But also, it's harder to burn out on this game because there's just less, like, side content to begin with, so it goes faster. Yeah, like, I had high hopes that the game would turn out well, just because it seemed like it fit them really nicely. But with Wolverine, it definitely feels like a bit of a stretch, like tonally and gameplay-wise from what Insomniac traditionally does. Like, like we had Days Gone a couple of years ago, and I almost feel like tonally something like that would fit Wolverine better. So yeah, I am very curious to see more about this game. Though to be fair, I don't expect to see anything about that game until like closer to when Spider-Man 2 releases, which again will probably be, which hopefully will be sometime next year. Yeah, in general, I actually really like this game. As a fan of these games since Spider-Man 2 on the GameCube, being able to just swing along and just kind of explore this virtual version of New York fighting crime has always been very fun. For a while, Spider-Man games were kind of in a rough patch, like the Amazing Spider-Man games were kind of not well received. And then there was a bit of a drop for a while. And yeah, I definitely feel like this game has some of the best movement. I almost feel like it's a little bit less momentum-based than like Spider-Man 2 or Web of Shadows, which I feel like had a lot more like momentum. Like, if you dove off the Empire State Building and then started swinging, you'd like launch yourself in the GameCube game, but I almost feel like it's a little bit more conservative, but it kind of makes sense because I almost feel like you might lose control otherwise. So I kind of understand possibly needing to slow it down a little bit. The combat's really fun too. I remember a lot of comparisons to Arkham with like the mix of like action and stealth. In some ways, I almost feel like it's more of a character action game with the ability to juggle characters, which feels very distinct from Arkham, which I like. As someone who does like the Arkham games, I do feel like these games still have very distinct combat styles, and yeah, definitely still in character for Spider-Man, and yeah, very unique, but still very enjoyable. And also being able to use like Spider Sense to dodge things is cool, and you have all the finishers, and Miles' case, you have the Venom powers. So yeah, in general, the combat's definitely a lot of fun too. Being able to like pick up enemies and throw them around with webs is fun as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend these games if you have a way to play them. Either PS4 or PS5 is probably fine. Again, I would recommend PS5 for both, to be honest. But if you only have like a PS4, that's still a good way to play at least the first game. I can attest to directly. And again, I feel like I can attest to Miles Morales probably being good on PC also, just based on the developers' consistency. I don't remember anything like game-breaking in Miles Morales on PS4, other than a glitch where Spider-Man would turn into different random objects in the world, like a patio heater. But that's more of a funny glitch than like a, impede progress kind of glitch, so I don't feel like that was a big deal, and it was actually kind of more funny than anything. Yeah, beyond that, I don't remember a whole lot of issues with the PS4 version, other than it just inherently doesn't run as well by being the PS4 version. So yeah, I would recommend the PS5 version if you have a PS5. If not, PS4 version is still sufficient, I would imagine. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to Spider-Man 2. I hope the game's good. Again, I hope it actually does release in 23, but if it gets delayed and comes out in 24, I'll totally understand that. But yeah, that about sums up my thoughts on the game. Again, I really enjoyed this game, and yeah, in a lot of ways, I actually do like the more concise style of this, in that it's a little bit less, like, overwhelming in side quests, and also less, padded, and has better overall pacing. One thing I do feel is this game doesn't necessarily hit the high highs story-wise of the first game, partly because I almost feel like it being so much shorter, the story doesn't have as much time to like fully develop, but it's still an okay story, and the characters I think are what really makes this story shine, which also was kind of the case in the first game. But with that being said, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for another discussion.